I think the live stream is going now. Let's see. It should be. All right, everyone. Welcome to Writer's Lunch this week. You can see I'm streaming to you from a remote location. My router died this morning, so I have no internet at my house right now. But we keep moving along, and I am looking forward to this presentation today. We have kind of a low attendance today, which is not a big deal. That just means there's more room for you guys who are here to ask questions and participate in the discussion. So definitely feel free, at any time you can raise your hand, if you have a comment or a question, or type in the chat, and I will keep an eye on that as well as I'm able. Um, Next week at Writer's Lunch, we have it's going to be Ask an Editor hour. So all or most of the Writer's Lunch hosts will be here to discuss. I don't remember what our topic is. Oh, it's humanizing non-human characters. So that should be a really interesting discussion. So we'll be talking about questions related to that next week at our Ask an Editor hour during the regular writer's lunch time. All right, so let's get into this. This is part three of my series on science and magic in fiction. This is the amalgam, and what we're talking about when we say the amalgam is we're talking about um, media that kind of combines science and magic together into something that's kind of a little bit different. So, a little bit about me. If you're not familiar, I'm a science fiction and fantasy author. I'm an editor at Tomeworks. I have some short fiction that's been published in Analog, Escape Pod, and other magazines and anthologies. And I'm currently querying a novel and writing another one. So, we're working on getting that backlog of material out there. And I do love blending science and magic in my writing. The sci fantasy genre is like one of my favorite genres to read as well as write. And then this is just a picture that I took when my husband and I visited Big Bend National Park. Um, Last year, and we got caught out on a hike during a haboob, and you can see the dust storm kind of coming towards us in the distance. So that was kind of a fun experience. But all right, so the amalgam. Um, when we're talking about the amalgam, this is not simply the coexistence of science and magic. It's a little bit more than that. This is where the lines between science and technology and magic are kind of blurred. They're either blurred or they are extremely delineated. There's some way in which science and magic affect each other, and whether that's to like combine into something else or to completely exclude each other, depends on kind of the category of amalgam that you're working with. So as I go through this presentation today, I'm going to go through kind of four broad categories of amalgam media that in my experience, media that kind of deals with this combination of science and magic kind of fall into. And again, these categories are very broad, and there is overlap between these categories. Um, so some media that fits into one category might also be argued to fit in a different category. So these aren't like exclusive categories. They do kind of like overlap and affect each other a little bit. So very broadly, we have the X Factor, Magitech, what I call the Doorknob Enigma, and Advanced Ancients. And so we're going to go through all four of these, and talk about what they mean. I did see some comments in the chat. Okay, no questions in the chat yet. Okay, good. Um, all right. So We're going to start with the X factor and talk about kind of what that means as a category of kind of amalgam. And this is magic that has a scientific explanation. Um, but this is not the same as hard magic. If you were in my presentation last month where I was talking about magic systems, I talked about hard magic and how, hard magic is, magic with very strict rules. Um, that's not what this is. That's not what the X factor is. The X factor is where magic has a scientific explanation as to its existence even if the magic itself um, is not scientifically explainable. So, in these cases, magic powers, right, might come from some sort of virus, a gene mutation, an alien fungus, some scientifically explainable thing that is the source of all magic. And this could have arisen naturally. It could be some sort of, natural phenomenon, whatever. But it is scientifically observable and explainable that we know exactly where magic comes from. Now, we might not necessarily know what magic's effects on people are, um, or its uses might not be super well understood, but we know exactly where it comes from in these instances. And so, this one is at least in my kind of reading experience, it's not super common, but there are some examples, and we'll go through them here. And if you can think of any other examples off the top of your head, please share them in the chat, because I would be really curious to know some other examples. Um, so when you are working with with like an X factor in your own writing, if this is something that you kind of want to work with in terms of like a source, a scientific source for magic, you as the writer, as the world builder, need to know what is the source of magic and where did it come from. And that's kind of like the most important element of like world building magic with X factors is knowing what that source is yourself so that you can kind of get it across in your narrative and your world building that like, yeah, we know exactly where this comes from. Your characters know. But some questions to kind of think about if you're writing a magic system like this or you know, an amalgam system like this, who has the X factor and who doesn't? And is it rare or common? Do people have the X factor, when they're exposed to um, a virus and it gives them some sort of abilities or powers that they didn't have before? Is it a virus plus some sort of gene mutation um, that kind of interact together to generate some sort of powers? And how does society react to people who have the X factor? Um, do these people keep it kind of secret that they have some sort of magical or supernatural abilities? Um, and if they don't keep it secret, are they ostracized or celebrated by society at large? And this is dealt with a lot in X-Men, which is one of my examples on the next slide, as an example of media that uses the X factor. Um, and kind of what is the balance of power in your world? Do people with the X factor, do they like are they a conglomerate group? Like, do they kind of form their own community separately from the rest of society? Do they kind of rule the rest of society because they have supernatural powers? Or is it the other way around? So these are all kind of things to think about if you're writing a system like this and you are looking to kind of generate plot ideas because these could help with some ideas for plot in a system like this. Thinking about kind of some of these problems that people in this world might face. So some examples of media that includes X factors. Of course, I have X-Men on here. The X-Men have powers that come from a gene mutation, and scientists in that world know what the gene mutation is. They know when people are born with it, but they don't know exactly how that gene mutation will express itself in that person until they kind of grow up and start to develop powers. So there's no like scientific explanation for how the gene will affect the individual person, but the gene itself is something that scientists recognize and know about. Um, And then Star Wars is another example of this, particularly in in the prequels, the Star Wars prequels, where in the Phantom Menace we get the explanation that Jedi's powers come from the concentration of midichlorians in their bloodstream or whatever. The midichlorians in this case being the X factor that gives the Jedi their powers. It's something scientific that the Jedi can quantify. Yes, you have midichlorians, but the Force itself, they don't. Um, there is a lot of like unexplainable element to the Force. So the Force itself is not like a hard magic system, but it is this kind of X factor amalgam where you do have this scientifically explainable source of it like expressing itself in people. And then another example is this is a Netflix series, Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts. This is a really cool show. It's geared toward a little bit younger audience, so it's not like quote for adults, but it's I have enjoyed it. I've watched it. It's good. Um, and here, they have a some sort of mutagen that has mutated animals into, you know, sometimes sentient beings, beings that are larger than, normal. They have, weird traits that they don't normally have. And also, there's this element of the mutagen being expressed in people as well. Um, and you might notice kind of a common theme, at least between like X-Men and Kipo, which is where the magic here in this amalgam, um, it's not really magic. It's not like the Force where you're using kind of magic powers, but it's sort of like a biological type of deal that grants supernatural abilities to people in more of a biological way. I did see a question in the chat. Let's see. Jean asks, do the shadow hunters fit in here? I'm actually not familiar with shadow hunters, so I'm not sure about that. But if there is like some um, uh, element in that series that is kind of like the source of all magic or supernatural powers that is scientifically quantifiable, then yeah, I would say yeah, probably. Um, but does anyone have questions about the X factor category of amalgam? Any other questions? Rhonda said shapeshifters would. Yeah. I also that's a good point. Because yeah, Kipo, there's some shapeshifting in Kipo that comes from this exposure to the mutagen. Um, Also, oh my God, Animorphs. There we go. In Animorphs, they uh, they have this like scientifically quantifiable thing that this alien race grants to the humans who become the Animorphs, and that is kind of the source of their power. Um, Ryan asks, would you say the Spren from the Stormlight Archive count? I've only read the first book of that series. Um, and it was like many, many years ago, so I don't recall. But yeah, again, like I said, there's overlap between these categories, and we talked about I think in uh, my presentation last month that some books and some media have like separate magic systems. So you might have a magic system in a book that has an X factor. So it is kind of an amalgam, science and magic system that has an X factor as the source. And then you might have another system that is just straight magic and is kind of completely different and separate from the X Factor. So you can combine like all these elements that I've talked about in all three of these presentations. You can combine them in lots of different ways to suit your story and your world, and that's kind of the fun part of all of this. Um, so the next one that I want to talk about, this one's kind of fun. This is the doorknob enigma. And this is where science and magic are mutually exclusive. Um, I did just mention like, completely separate magic systems. And this is kind of a similar idea where magic users can't use science or technology and vice versa. So like scientists can't use magic. And you can be really strict with this. Like in some cases, you could have scientists who can't even comprehend that magic exists, even though there's evidence of it existing all around them. A really good example of this, and the reason that I called this category the doorknob enigma, is Adrian Tchaikovsky's Shadow of the Apt series. And in Shadows of the Apt, you have uh, the apt, who are, a group of people who can understand and use science and technology. And then you have the inapt who can't. And they, are generally more magic users. But in this universe, in these books, the inapt can't even work something as simple as a doorknob. If they are in a house with doorknobs or a building with doorknobs, they have to have someone with them at all times to open doors for them, or else they get stuck inside. And there's actually several plot points in those books where inapt characters do get stuck because they end up behind a closed door without someone there to open it for them. Um, and also, in this universe, the apt, even though there is evidence of magic existing in their world, the apt cannot comprehend it. And like even when that existence is like right in front of them, or like that evidence is right in front of them, their minds just kind of like explain it away as something else. Um, so you can get really strict with how much um, uh, how mutually exclusive science and magic can be in this category of amalgam. Um, Shay asks if I can repeat the name of the books. Yeah, it's called Shadows of the Apt. I'll type it in the chat. Um, and it's by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Oh wait, I'm sending it to the wrong. Okay, hang on, sorry. Shadows of the Apt by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Yeah. I haven't finished the series myself. It's like 10 or 12 books. I haven't finished it. I think I'm on like book 6 or 7. But yeah, it is really interesting. And the main kind of through line of the story is about this struggle between the apt and the inapt, and also struggles between the apt. It's all just like a big thing. Um, but in this category of the doorknob enigma, sometimes you have cases where the magic world and the non-magic world are kept separate, but that's not always the case. But like in Harry Potter, right? The magic world is separate from the Muggle world, and they don't really overlap. And when they do, they have to do certain things to kind of maintain the secrecy of magic's existence. And so a lot of times in this category, you get where, whoops, I accidentally scrolled through, where magic is seen as dangerous. by non-magic users where they don't really know anything about it and things like that. So this is where, again, science and magic are kind of mutually exclusive in these instances. So if you're writing a doorknob enigma, I would encourage you not to pull your punches. Make it weird for your reader. Part of the reason that the Shadows of the Apt series is so memorable for me is because it's weird. Like every time it comes up that an inapt character can't work a doorknob, or can't pick up a crossbow and use it. Every time that comes up in the series, it makes my little brain go like, "What is going on? Why can't they figure this out?" So it kind of makes you remember that like, hey, there's something weird going on here. Um, and you can also have, different levels of science and technology be affected by this. Like you could say where, magicians can't use like high tech, right? So they can't use like cell phones or radio or, whatever, but they can work a doorknob. They can, work a simple pulley, or a lever or whatever. Have a turn a water wheel, have uh, a mill to grind wheat or whatever. Wizards could do that, but they can't work like a cell phone. Um, or, you could have it be something totally different where, they can't do any of that stuff. Or, maybe they can work a cell phone because their magic can affect the cell phone, but it can't affect, the doorknob or the lock or, the the mill, the grindstone at the mill to grind wheat faster or something. Whatever works to serve your story. You could also try flipping the trope of magic being secret and dangerous to science being secret and dangerous, because it's really common for magic to be secret or dangerous, but it's less common in this category for science to be considered as dangerous and kept a secret. So you could flip that trope around. That would be kind of an interesting way to write an amalgam like this. Um, and you could also think about, and sorry for the typo on my slide, but how do magic users exist in the non-magic world and vice versa? Like if the magic world and the non-magic world are separate, when a magic user enters the non-magic world for whatever reason, how do they fit in? How do they kind of exist in this world? And what is the balance of power? Do the magic users run the place? Do the scientists run the place? And does it really matter who runs it? I do see a question in the chat. Does punching out a door still use too much physics? That's funny. That's up to you. If a simple thing as a hinge is too complicated for a magic user's brain to understand, then they might not be able to even push a door open. So that's totally up to you as the author and what you feel serves your story. So some examples of this I've already talked about the Shadows of the Apt series and Harry Potter a little bit. So Empire in Black and Gold is the first book in the Shadows of the Apt series. Um, but another example of this that I've read recently is uh, the Dresden Files. So Stormfront being the first book by Jim Butcher, and in this case, uh, magic. The main character, who's a magic detective, magician detective, he technology doesn't work right around him. He lives in, the normal world that everyone else lives in. He kind of keeps his magic secret. No one's really supposed to know that magic is real, unless, they're magicians themselves. And he has this problem where technology he can use it to some extent, but it just doesn't really work right. He's always like losing phone calls and his car is always breaking down and it's explained that it's because of the magic that he uses that technology just doesn't really work quite right for him. So definitely interesting if you're looking for magic detectives. This would be a cool book to check out. Um, All right, so category three, this is Magitech. This is, I think, this is my favorite one, and I'll get into why on my slide. But this is my favorite category of amalgam. This is where technology is powered by magic. Um, and let's see. All right, so what is it? Actually, let me look because I saw something pop up in the chat. Rhonda asks, how about leaving it to the reader to decide between magic or science? Heinlein touched on that with Stranger in a Strange Land. Yeah, and that's something that, as the writer, you can leave a lot of things up to like the reader's interpretation, in terms of, what is magic and what is science and, what is somewhere in between the two. And, again, it really just depends on what you're trying to do. If kind of the point of your book is to leave the reader with these questions of like, what's real and what's not and, whatever, then, definitely, try to work that in as you're writing. Um, but yeah. Okay. All right, so what is Magitech? This is where technology is powered by magic. You may have rune stones, crystals, magic fluids, something that's unexplained, but the technology does not work without magic. And in this case, this kind of blurs the line a lot more between what is magic and what is science and what is technology. This is where that line really gets blurred, which is when you have Magitech. Um, in a lot of cases, a lot of media that uses Magitech, you don't have any advances in technology without magic because magic is what enables the technology and the advancements and the science to exist. It's all kind of one and the same thing. And this is very common in video games. And you can see this is a screenshot from Horizon. I think it's Zero Dawn. It's either Zero Dawn or it's the sequel that I don't think is out yet. But anyway, there's a lot of Magitech in this game. Um, but it's less common in books. And I think the reason for this is that Magitech a lot of times um, is more of an aesthetic, and it has a really strong visual aesthetic that doesn't come across quite as well in non-visual media. So I think that's why you see it a lot uh, in video games and not quite as often in books. Let's see. Ryan said Horizon is really Clark's third law technology doesn't stop the tribal people who don't know how any of it works. Yeah, that's actually my fourth category. So again, there is overlap between these categories, depending on um, you know, kind of the perceptions of the technology, by, not only the characters, but also by the readers, how these categories overlap. But if you're writing Magitech, I do encourage you to have a really strong aesthetic. Even though, again, like writing is not visual media, but you can still get some, visual aesthetics across in writing. So I definitely encourage, building a very strong aesthetic for your Magitech, because that is kind of like the core of what Magitech is in media. Um, some other questions that you can think about while you are writing Magitech is magic a limited resource? How if magic is limited, um, how might the limit affect scientific advances? Are researchers always trying to um, optimize efficiency so that they use less of this limited magic resource? Or, are they blowing through it all and, they're having a hard time, creating new technologies or, even using old ones because, there's no magic left? Um, are they researching alternative, power sources for their technology? Is there some other way to generate magic to power this technology. Um, and what tech needs magic is another question to consider. Again, we talked about with the doorknob enigma, advanced tech or, more primitive tech. Um, so does all technology need magic in this world? Can you not build a lever or a pulley without magic? Or is it just kind of advanced tech where it's like cell phones and computers and um, you know, airplanes and whatever that need magic? And that would be something for, you as the author to kind of decide when you're building this world um, uh, for your books. So some good examples of Magitech. I do have one book example here. That's Gideon the Ninth. And this is a fantastic book. But in this book, the modern kind of spacefaring technology is powered by necromancy magic. So definitely check this out. And it has a very strong aesthetic. I mean, if you can't tell by the cover. But there's a very strong aesthetic here in this book series. Arcane, which is a show, but it is based on a video game. So again, this is a lot more common in video games than it is in books. Um, but Arcane is a really good example of Magitech, and it's kind of more steampunk flavored. But a lot of the more advanced technology is powered by these like magic crystals. Um, and then the two most recent Legend of Zelda games, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, also involve Magitech. You could argue that maybe some of the older Zelda games do too, but these specifically lean into the aesthetic of Magitech, where the magic involves gears and levers and robots and whatever. So definitely check that. If you're into video games, definitely check out Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom um, as an example of Magitech with a very strong aesthetic that's carried over both games. Um, but yeah, this is my favorite category of amalgam, and I think it's because of the really strong visual aesthetics. And well, something that I like to kind of experiment with in my own writing is how to get strong visuals across, even for people who don't necessarily visualize as much in their heads as I do. And yeah, so I like to build these kind of like really strong aesthetics in my own work. So my final category is advanced ancients, which Ryan brought up that Horizon is really Clarke's third law. You could even argue. Let me go back. Let me, if I can. Um, Tears of the Kingdom is also kind of like Clarke's third law, advanced ancients. So this is where magic is technology misunderstood. So if you are not familiar with Clarke's third law, that is that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And the way that this crops up most in media, the reason why this category is called advanced ancients, the way this crops up most, or like the most common trope of this that kind of goes along with this third law, is advanced ancients, where there was an ancient civilization that existed thousands of years ago that were highly advanced and whatever, and now they're gone, but their technology remains, and we don't understand how it works. So we think of it as magic. It's magic to us. But to them, it was just like, you know, a cell phone. But honestly, a lot of people don't understand how cell phones work. So, we're kind of at the point where a lot of our technology um, is advanced enough now that to people who don't have a good understanding of technology, it does feel kind of magical in real life. But this is just where magic is kind of based on a lack of scientific understanding. And in these cases, you also get where it's unclear to the reader if it's actually magic or not, because you'll get technology in these forms of media. You'll get technology that feels like magic even to the reader, not just to the characters who don't understand it. So it can be kind of unclear whether this is like strictly technology or whether it is actually magical. Um, but yeah, again, like the way that this most commonly crops up is advanced when there's like an advanced ancient technology. Another example is alien technology, where humans are encountering alien technology and it's so wildly advanced that it's basically magic to the humans. Um, and again, like I've already mentioned, this does often overlap with the Magitech category, where, the ancient peoples have left behind, these miraculous, things that, we can still use, but we don't know how they work. And, they involve, maybe lasers or something. And so, to us, they're magic. So when you're writing Advanced Ancients, some questions to kind of keep in mind as you're kind of doing your world building is like, what happened to them? Where did they go? Why did they leave? Are they coming back? A lot of times, books will deal with this question of, are they coming back? And if they come back, what are they going to do? Um, so that is definitely like it can be a through line of mystery for your characters to, kind of think about and come back to, and, maybe pull you through several books of, figuring out, what happened to this ancient civilization. Um, but another thing to think about is, who can wield this misunderstood technology? Who can actually use it? Can everyone use it? Or does it require a certain minimum of understanding? Or does it require some sort of X factor to be able to use this technology that not everyone has? And like the book that I'm querying right now deals with this has this trope in it, or this category of amalgam in it, um, but it also includes like the X factor category as well, because the only people who can use this ancient technology that's um, you know, seen as magic, are people with a specific thing that allows them to use it, that they can kind of understand. So, but yeah, how much understanding is kind of needed to use this advanced technology, if any? Or can, someone just pick up you know, any person just pick up some sort of, laser gun and use it. And those are questions that can affect like your world building, your characters, your plot, really anything as you're kind of building your story. So some examples of advanced ancients. A puppy dog. I don't know if you can hear the puppy dog walking around, but she's hanging out. I'm hanging out with the doggo right now. But so some examples of the of this category um, are three books that I really like. So Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. This is a really cool book that deals with, these advanced ancients leaving behind technology, and, certain people are able to use it, and, how they kind of um, form a kind of a hegemony in society, and um, whatever. So this is a really cool book, really cool series. Again, strong aesthetics, like with Magitech, because it is kind of Magitech as well, but strong aesthetics here. Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky, another Adrian Tchaikovsky book. I feel like I'm always recommending him. But this is a really cool novella. That is about kind of the last um, member of an ancient race interacting with very um, primitive, to him, very primitive people. And uh, it's really interesting because this book especially focuses on like the culture clash between him and this less advanced society and how they kind of figure out how to communicate with each other over the course of the story. And then the fifth season by N.K. Jemisin. I'm also always recommending this book. If you haven't read it, please read it. It's so good. Um, but this fits into kind of like the um, Advanced Ancients. Not so much the first book, but when you get into the second and third book of the series, you start getting that undercurrent of Advanced Ancients in there. This also fits into kind of Magitech um, as well, where the um, magic is kind of like technology, but then there's also like an X factor. You could argue that this one, I think, fits into maybe all four categories that I've talked about today because they also kind of keep magic and non-magic separate, and people with magic are ostracized by the rest of the society in this book. So you could argue that this one in particular fits into all four categories that I've talked about today. Um, but I put it here because for me, reading this series, the most memorable category that it fit into was this Advanced Ancients. Because when all of that kind of information started coming into the story, coming into the world building, that's when I felt it really kind of like ramped up and felt like it had a lot of depth as a series. So definitely, I highly recommend check all these books out if you haven't. They're all very good. And even going back to like the other ones that I recommended, maybe skip Harry Potter, but Shadows of the Apt and the Dresden Files, definitely check those out as well, if you haven't. So I have about 10 minutes left. So some general advice for blending science and magic in your writing. Um, when you're writing amalgams, it's just like writing anything else. Follow your process. However, world building works for you. Um, I'm more of a, well, it really depends on where my first inspiration comes from. Generally, I'll start with like an aesthetic, which I guess kind of makes sense. I start with a visual, which makes sense of why I like visuals so much and like playing with them in my work a lot. But follow your process. If you're more of a bottom up world builder or a top down world builder, whatever works for you. Just consider as you're working through your world building, consider why this amalgam is important to your world or story or your characters. Why is it important for science and technology to affect each other in a specific way? And this can help inform what your amalgam of science and technology ultimately looks like. Um, and again, you can have like a blend of the four categories, like in the fifth season, you can blend just one or two categories, or strictly stay within one category of amalgam, depending on what serves your story the most, and thinking about why it's important, and is it going to affect the plot, or is it just going to fade into the background and be more of a set dressing type of device. You can also use amalgams of science and technology to explore certain themes in unique ways. Like I talked about uh, with Elder Race, it deals with themes of like culture clash and cultural exchange through this lens of, someone using magic, what's essentially magic, and someone who is like medieval in terms of their technology level. So you can work with those kinds of themes. You can work with themes of like climate change and energy shortages, especially if you're dealing with like magitech and the magic that powers the technology is a limited resource. You can come at those themes from a magic angle instead of a oil and gas angle. Um, you can also deal with themes of like, societal outcasts or shifting hegemonies. I mean, X-Men deals with this a lot. That's like kind of like, one of the main points of X-Men is this struggle between, the X-Men, people with the X factor, and people without it. And so you can come at this from, a more fantasy lens and still deal with these kind of like hard-hitting themes that are relevant to society today. So I definitely encourage you to like think about these themes when you're working with amalgams because it will help make your story, I don't want to say more accessible, but maybe more relatable to the reader if you're dealing with themes that like they see every day in their real life. So yeah, so that is it from me. It's about 10 minutes till 2, so stayed ahead of the game on that one. Um, but thank you guys for coming. I appreciate y'all being here. Again, next week is our Ask an Editor hour, where we're going to talk about humanizing non-human characters. So that should be really fun. We do have some questions lined up to talk about for that. But if you do have questions that you want answered that kind of fit that theme, or even if they don't, if you're in our Discord server, you can submit questions to us. We always prioritize questions from our Patreon subscribers. So if you're subscribed to our Patreon, you can submit a question to us either through Patreon or via email or through our Discord, and we will prioritize your questions as a thank you for subscribing to our Patreon. Um, and yeah, also my last little spiel, my last little plug, Writer's Lunch is free. We are dedicated for it to always be free. We like providing free, kind of fun educational resources to fellow authors. But there are costs involved with running Writer's Lunch. We do, have to pay for a Zoom account. We do have to pay for, a couple other online things to kind of maintain our writer's lunch. You know, what is it? Structure, whatever it is. Just to maintain our kind of writer's lunch presence, there are a couple of costs that we incur with that, and creating this content for you guys every week, is a lot of work on our end. So if you would like to, or if you are able to, donate, there's a QR code here for our PayPal. You can, donate, send a couple bucks our way. Anything would be appreciated to kind of help us, offset our costs a little bit. But other than that, if you guys have any more questions, there are a few minutes left for questions or comments. Um, I see Rhonda in the chat said X-Men is also about discrimination based on ability and alternative ability. Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And so, these are themes that you can come at with from a fantasy lens. And I think a lot of times uh, people get defensive when themes like that are pointed out to them. In real world examples, people get defensive. And I think that sometimes people are more open to thinking about those problems, the societal problems, thinking about societal problems and um, world problems and, whatever. I think a lot of times people are more receptive to them when they're presented in a fictional way. Um, and, through a more fantastical lens, versus just pointing out, hey, this is a problem that exists in the real world. Because you run the risk of them feeling like you're telling them they're doing something wrong by just pointing out the problem in the real world. But if you're, coming at it from a fantasy lens and kind of, dealing with it in that way, they can be a little bit more receptive to receiving uh, that this is an issue and start realizing it in real life. So Rhonda said art should be activism, and yes, I agree. I think that, you know, these are themes that, and we're gonna talk about this a little bit in our writer's lunch or in our Ask an Editor hour next week. Humanizing non-human characters. Art should be activism, and we should be, as science fiction and fantasy authors, we should be tackling these hard themes from a fictional lens that people might be more receptive to, because with the idea that if they are receptive to to these problems, to these ideas from a fantasy lens, they might start noticing them in real life and wanting to do something about it. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's great whenever you see um, hard topics being tackled in fiction. Um, so yeah. But anyway, it looks like there aren't really any more questions. But again, thank you all for being here. I hope this was fun. I hope you enjoyed the different categories. I hope you got some ideas for some new things to read. One of these days, I'm gonna stop recommending Adrian Tchaikovsky, but I've read a lot of his work recently, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. Um, but yeah, thanks for coming. We hope to see you all next week. And yeah, be safe out there. Well, if I can figure out how to end the meeting, I'm gonna end the meeting. But thanks for coming. Bye, everybody.